On November 10th, 2023, Jameka Lachelle Williams was shot and killed outside her residence in Houston, Texas. She was 38 years old. According to police reports, the incident occurred in front of her children. The suspect fled the scene before law enforcement arrived. Jameka was pronounced dead at the scene. Williams was employed as a quality assurance manager at Cigna Healthcare and was a graduate of Texas Southern University. She had 4 children. Publicly available information confirms she had recently separated from a partner. There were no restraining orders or active police protections documented prior to her death. Witnesses stated that the suspect approached deliberately. There was no reported altercation prior to the shooting. The investigation focused on individuals previously involved with the victim. Early evidence suggested the act was targeted and not random. The incident led to a community response, including a fundraising campaign and increased public discussion on domestic violence and intervention failures. Law enforcement opened a homicide investigation. The suspect was later identified and taken into custody. Charges included first-degree murder and child endangerment.
3 young daughters and her killer still on the run. Fox 26's Abigail Dye went to the emotional balloon release tonight.
A mother killed in front of her 14, 12, and 7-year-old daughters.
They're traumatized because that's all that they're going to remember, the last look of her, like seeing her on the ground.
Pink balloons and broken hearts.
This case involves several investigative angles. The victim's background, possible warning signs prior to the incident, relationship history, legal system involvement, and immediate law enforcement response. The timeline of events leading up to the shooting is being used to assess whether the incident could have been prevented through earlier intervention or reporting. The purpose of this report is to examine the documented facts, establish the timeline, and review available records and law enforcement findings. The objective is to present a complete overview of the events leading to the death of Jameka Williams, the investigative process that followed, and the legal outcomes currently in progress. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's begin. Jameka Lachelle Williams was a 38-year-old woman residing in Houston, Texas. She was employed as a quality assurance manager at Cigna Healthcare, a role she had held with distinction. Known for her attention to detail and work ethic, Jameka balanced her professional life with her responsibilities as a mother. She was a mother of 4 children, all of whom were deeply connected to her daily routines. Her family described her as protective, nurturing, and driven. Jameka was an alumna of Texas Southern University. Her academic background contributed to her rise in the healthcare sector. Outside of her job, she maintained a visible and positive presence on social media, frequently sharing motivational quotes, family-centered posts, and uplifting content. Friends describe her as someone who tried to see the best in life, even during difficult times. Within her community, she was a respected figure. Jameka was active in her local church and regularly attended school events and activities related to her children. She was considered a reliable figure in her support networks, someone who prioritized her family's well-being above all. Reports indicated she had recently separated from a long-term partner. Those close to her said the breakup had been difficult but necessary. Observers noted that although Jameka remained composed in public, subtle changes in her demeanor and routines suggested underlying tension in the final months of her life. In the months preceding her death, Jameka experienced a breakup with her long-term partner. Multiple sources close to the family suggested the relationship had become strained due to controlling behavior by the male partner. While no official police documentation was available in public records confirming physical abuse, several individuals stated that Jameka had previously expressed concerns about her safety and well-being. Friends reported she had started distancing herself from some social circles. According to multiple accounts, Jameka became more private and selective about who she communicated with and what she shared. She stopped attending certain gatherings and became more alert about her surroundings. Family members said that her tone shifted during conversations. She became more guarded, less open, and more focused on her children's routines. Although there was no restraining order filed, individuals close to the victim suggested that there had been repeated attempts by the former partner to contact her. These contacts were described as uninvited and consistent. One witness reported that Jameka confided she believed she was being watched, though no surveillance reports or official stalking complaints were found in public databases. Her behavior in the final days became increasingly cautious. She altered her routines and made fewer public appearances. Conversations with her children reportedly took on a more serious tone. There were signs she was preparing for something or trying to prevent something, but those signs would ultimately be too subtle, too late. The events unfolded during the evening hours of Friday, November 10th, 2023. Jameka had returned to her residence in Houston, Texas, where she lived with her children. According to reports, it was a typical day in terms of schedule. She had worked, returned home, and began her evening routine with the children. At some point that evening, an individual, later confirmed to be known to Jameka, approached her outside of her home. Several of her children were reportedly present at the time. There was no verbal altercation noted by neighbors or witnesses. The shooter approached Jameka directly with intent. Multiple shots were fired. The exact number has not been disclosed by law enforcement or family representatives. Witnesses said the shooting happened quickly, leaving no time for intervention or escape. Jameka collapsed at the scene. The suspect immediately fled, leaving behind stunned and traumatized children. A neighbor dialed emergency services, who arrived minutes later. Despite efforts to stabilize her, Jameka Lachelle Williams was pronounced dead at the scene. The scene was secured. Police began immediate canvassing for security footage from nearby homes and traffic cameras. Interviews with witnesses, including children and neighbors, were conducted that same night. Initial reports confirmed this was not a random attack. Law enforcement confirmed early on that the victim and the shooter had a prior connection, believed to be a domestic relationship. The attack was classified as a homicide with potential premeditation. Investigators pursued the suspect, though his name was not publicly released within the first 48 hours. The case was assigned to homicide detectives familiar with domestic violence-related crimes. Do you think unfiled concerns and verbal threats should be treated with the same weight as physical violence in domestic disputes? Why do many victims hesitate to file restraining orders, even when they feel unsafe? How can communities improve early intervention when someone feels they're being watched or threatened? What signs should friends and families never ignore in someone's changing behavior? Can technology and surveillance play a stronger role in preventing crimes like this before they happen? In the days following the fatal shooting of 38-year-old Jameka Lachelle Williams in Houston, Texas, the impact rippled far beyond the crime scene. Williams, a devoted mother of four, was killed in front of her children, an event that left lasting emotional damage not only on her family, but on the surrounding community. Her children, present during the attack, were immediately removed from the scene and placed under the temporary care of relatives. Reports confirmed that child protection services were brought in to ensure safety and psychological intervention. Early assessments indicated emotional trauma among the minors, prompting urgent arrangements for grief counseling and long-term mental health support. The oldest child, reported to be in their early teens, provided limited details to law enforcement under the supervision of social workers. The family of Jameka Williams released a short public statement in the immediate aftermath of her death. The message was direct. They demanded justice and requested privacy as they processed the sudden loss. The statement made no reference to a known suspect, but emphasized that Jameka had lived for her children and did not deserve to be taken so violently. Social media platforms were quickly filled with posts paying tribute to Jameka. Women across Houston and beyond posted messages expressing both grief and solidarity, often connecting her case to the broader issue of domestic violence. Posts under hashtags such as hashtag Justice for Jameka and hashtag Say Her Name included personal anecdotes from women who had endured similar situations, many of which involved separation from abusive partners. Within 48 hours of her death, a GoFundMe campaign was launched by a verified family member. The stated goal was to cover funeral costs and establish a fund for the continued care of her 4 children. As the campaign gained traction, it was shared widely on local Facebook pages, true crime groups, and among Houston-area church networks. The fundraising page included pictures of Jameka with her children and brief commentary describing her as a protector and provider. Local news outlets picked up the story early, but the initial coverage was minimal. Reports confirmed the shooting, acknowledged the presence of children at the scene, and stated that the investigation was ongoing. Notably, no official suspect name was released during the early coverage. Multiple outlets referenced domestic violence as a possible factor, but offered little in terms of specifics. This lack of immediate detail, combined with no swift arrest, raised concern among members of the public. Community advocates questioned whether Jameka had previously reached out to law enforcement, and if any red flags had gone unaddressed. Women's advocacy organizations issued statements urging police to take quick action and disclose more information. Petitions began circulating, demanding transparency in the investigation and calling for stronger protections for domestic violence victims. As public pressure mounted, the Houston Police Department moved into the next phase of its response. Law enforcement classified the case as a homicide within hours of the shooting. The working theory, according to internal sources not named publicly, was that this was a targeted act, possibly domestic in nature. Initial statements from police confirmed that the suspect appeared to have known the victim and that the shooting was not random. Investigators began canvassing the area for surveillance footage from nearby homes, apartment complexes, and businesses. Multiple homes were equipped with Ring doorbell systems and other video monitoring tools. Law enforcement reviewed any footage from the hours surrounding the crime, especially material that could place the suspect near the victim's home prior to the shooting. Detectives conducted interviews with neighbors and family friends. Several neighbors reported seeing a vehicle circling the area days before the murder, and one resident claimed to have seen an unfamiliar man sitting in a parked car for extended periods on multiple evenings. These leads were noted and cross-referenced with Jameka's known associates. The suspect was reportedly identified early in the investigation, but not named publicly at first. Law enforcement sources cited the need to gather additional evidence before issuing a warrant or releasing details to the press. This delay led to increased criticism from advocacy groups and local citizens, who feared that a known and possibly dangerous individual was still at large. Family cooperation was confirmed. Investigators worked closely with relatives to obtain more information about Jameka's past relationships, potential threats, and recent concerns she may have voiced. The children, having witnessed the shooting, were considered key witnesses. Their statements were taken under close supervision, with trauma-informed interview techniques used to minimize further harm. Detectives also reviewed Jameka's phone records, social media activity, and text messages. According to sources familiar with the case, there were signs of repeated, unwanted communication from a former partner leading up to the incident. These communications reportedly included threats and demands for reconciliation. Screenshots and call logs were preserved as potential evidence. The name of the suspect was not disclosed in the immediate aftermath of the murder. However, it was widely speculated, and later supported by internal sources, that the individual was a former romantic partner of Jameka's. The motive under consideration was jealousy, possessiveness, and refusal to accept the end of their relationship. Friends of the victim provided informal statements to media and law enforcement indicating that the suspect had a history of controlling behavior. Descriptions included terms like obsessive, manipulative, and quick-tempered. Although not all friends were aware of physical violence, several indicated that Jameka had expressed concern about being followed and had once mentioned her intention to change a routine out of fear. Law enforcement reviewed the suspect's prior criminal record. Public records showed at least one previous charge for harassment, though it had not resulted in jail time. There were no known restraining orders filed by Jameka, but investigators found online posts that hinted at emotional and psychological abuse. Further, Interviews with co-workers at Cigna Healthcare suggested that Jameka had recently begun changing her commute pattern and working remotely more often. She reportedly told one colleague she was trying to avoid a problem, but did not elaborate. The suspect's status, whether arrested or at large, was not disclosed publicly at the time of early reporting. Unconfirmed sources later stated that a warrant had been issued and law enforcement was actively pursuing leads on the suspect's whereabouts. Surveillance footage reportedly tied the suspect's vehicle to the scene on the evening of the murder. Community advocates and media outlets continue to demand updates. Meanwhile, pressure built around the investigation's pace, with public sentiment growing increasingly frustrated at what appeared to be a slow pursuit of justice. Shortly after the fatal shooting of 38-year-old Jameka Lachelle Williams outside her Houston home on November 10, 2023, law enforcement officials launched a full-scale investigation to identify and apprehend the suspect. Within 72 hours, Houston Police Department issued a statement confirming the arrest of a man believed to be Jameka's former partner. His name was withheld initially, pending formal charges. Investigators pieced together eyewitness testimonies, including statements from Jameka's children and neighbors. Surveillance footage from nearby residences reportedly captured a vehicle matching the suspect's car, leaving the scene shortly after shots were fired. Police used cell phone tower data and vehicle registration information to track the suspect's movements before and after the incident. He was taken into custody on November 13, 2023, without incident during a traffic stop on the outskirts of Harris County. Following the arrest, the district attorney's office filed multiple felony charges: first-degree murder for premeditated killing of Jameka Williams and endangering a child due to the fact that at least one of her children witnessed a shooting from a close distance. The suspect was booked at the Harris County Jail, where he awaited his initial court appearance. During the bond hearing, the prosecution emphasized the severity of the crime, the trauma inflicted on the children, and the risk of flight. They requested no bond. The defense argued for a reduced bond amount, citing the suspect's lack of prior violent felony convictions and his community ties. However, the judge denied bond based on the probable cause affidavit and the risk posed to surviving witnesses and family members. Over the following weeks, pretrial motions revealed both sides' legal strategies. The defense filed a motion to suppress the children's testimonies, citing trauma and lack of reliability under emotional stress. Another motion requested a psychological evaluation of the defendant. A public defender representing the accused initially hinted at a crime of passion defense, claiming the murder was not premeditated but rather an impulsive act during a heated argument. However, this theory lacked substantiating evidence and did not align with what investigators had documented. The prosecution focused on premeditation and calculated intent. They presented digital evidence, including threatening text messages sent by the suspect weeks before the incident. Search history from the suspect's phone revealed prior queries about restraining orders and untraceable firearms. Furthermore, the timeline of events, particularly the suspect's deliberate drive to Jameka's home after weeks of separation, was used to support the theory that the act was planned. As the legal battle gained momentum, community activists and victim advocacy groups pushed for a maximum sentence, including life without parole. Public demonstrations and press conferences were organized outside the courthouse in the weeks leading up to the trial. The trial was scheduled for March 2024. Media coverage intensified as more details emerged through court filings and witness interviews. Courtroom sketches and updates appeared daily on local news outlets and social media channels. Throughout the proceedings, the defendant remained mostly silent, often avoiding eye contact with Jameka's family members present in court. His demeanor was described by court reporters as stoic and unengaged. Key testimony came from forensic experts, digital analysts, and Jameka's oldest child, who, despite undergoing trauma counseling, gave a recorded statement about the moments leading up to the shooting. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced the defendant to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Public reaction to the case began as soon as news of Jameka Williams' death spread online. Within hours of her identity being released, friends, family, and community members created tributes and memory posts. A candlelight vigil was organized in her honor, just days after the shooting, drawing hundreds of attendees. Another was held on the day of her funeral. Two major hashtags quickly trended on social media platforms. Hashtag Justice for Jameka and hashtag Say Her Name, both aimed at drawing attention to domestic violence and femicide in the Houston area. Activists used Jameka's story to highlight the systemic failure to protect women who leave controlling or abusive partners. National domestic violence advocacy organizations issued statements referencing the case, urging lawmakers to strengthen protection policies for women at risk. Public discourse surrounding stalking behavior, coercive control, and red flag laws intensified. Online forums and media outlets covered the broader implications of the case, especially the documented pattern of ignored warning signs that often lead to homicide. Several local women's shelters reported a noticeable spike in calls and consultations from survivors, citing concerns similar to those described in Jameka's case. Churches and schools across Houston mobilized to support her children. Fundraisers were held to help with funeral costs, legal support, and therapy for the minors. As trial updates were posted online, the public engaged in debates about sentencing, accountability, and early intervention. The story gained national media attention when major outlets picked up the trial verdict in March 2024, sparking renewed conversations around domestic violence legislation. Jameka Williams left behind 4 children, ranging in age from toddler to early teens. 2 of them reportedly witnessed her shooting. The long-term psychological trauma of this event remains a critical concern for both family members and child welfare advocates. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, the children were placed in temporary custody with close relatives. Eventually, guardianship was awarded to their maternal grandparents, who also coordinated with licensed trauma counselors to begin therapeutic support. The youngest child, unable to comprehend the full scale of the tragedy, reportedly began to exhibit regressive behavior, while the older children displayed signs of post-traumatic stress. Local schools activated their crisis response units, offering emotional support sessions, adjusted workloads, and personalized education plans for the children affected. Social services remained involved, conducting welfare checks and connecting the family with long-term trauma support programs. One of the most impactful moments during sentencing came when a recorded statement from Jameka's oldest child was played in court. The statement, submitted to the family's attorney, recounted the emotional and physical effects of watching their mother die and described her as a shield who no longer stood between them and the world. Following the trial, friends and family of Jameka launched a community initiative named the Jameka Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence, particularly those with children. The foundation partnered with advocacy groups to provide emergency relocation grants, mental health services, and educational resources for survivors and their families. The story of Jameka Williams continues to serve as a sobering example of the deadly consequences of untreated domestic conflict and the societal need for early intervention. Through public advocacy, legal action, and a sustained commitment from her loved ones, her name remains part of a growing call to action. The courtroom was filled with silence as the final verdict was read. After months of hearings, witness testimonies, evidence presentations, and deliberation, the jury found the defendant, Jameka Williams' former partner, guilty of first-degree murder. The prosecution had presented a case built on premeditation, motive, and psychological control, arguing that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but rather the final step in a long pattern of manipulation and obsession. The sentencing phase followed swiftly. The judge handed down life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, citing the presence of children during the crime, the calculated nature of the killing, and the emotional devastation inflicted on the surviving family members. The courtroom heard multiple victim impact statements, a sobering reminder of the irreversible void left by Jameka's death. Her eldest daughter, speaking with composure beyond her years, recalled witnessing her mother's final moments and described the psychological trauma that still wakes her up at night. A cousin spoke on behalf of the family, describing Jameka not just as a mother, but as the only anchor keeping the family together. Though the sentencing provided a form of legal closure, many in the family and community acknowledged that emotional closure remained distant. The children, now living with relatives, faced years of counseling and adjustment. The family was left with lingering questions. Could this have been stopped? Did the system fail Jameka? The investigation and trial uncovered several systemic gaps that continue to concern advocates and legal experts. One key question remains: could this murder have been prevented? According to those close to Jameka, the warning signs were there. Friends reported she had expressed fear in the weeks leading up to the shooting. She mentioned being followed, receiving repeated unwanted calls, and noticing her ex-partner parked near her workplace and home. However, no restraining order was ever filed. This raises concerns about how stalking and emotional abuse are addressed legally, particularly in the absence of physical violence. In many jurisdictions, including Texas, stalking laws require pattern behavior and credible threats to trigger legal action. For women like Jameka, who may be hesitant to escalate out of fear of retaliation, the threshold for protection may simply be too high. Another major concern is whether law enforcement missed red flags. Were there previous domestic disturbance calls? Did officers respond appropriately? Were early intervention resources made available to Jameka? These are questions that remain unanswered, as official reports were limited in detail. What is clear is that a coordinated domestic violence response system was either unavailable or not accessed in this case. Advocates also question whether Texas stalking and domestic violence laws are adequate. Some believe the legal system still prioritizes physical evidence over behavioral red flags, leaving many women without protection until violence escalates. This case also highlights the need for public education on warning signs of obsession and control. Jameka's story is a reminder that domestic abuse doesn't always begin with bruises. It begins with isolation, monitoring, intimidation, emotional threats, and refusal to accept boundaries. Understanding and responding to these early indicators is crucial to prevention. Beyond individual behavior, larger systems failed Jameka Williams. These include legal systems that didn't act fast enough, social systems that normalize emotional abuse, and community responses that may have treated warning signs as private relationship issues instead of public safety concerns. As we examine the final verdict in the murder of Jameka Williams, we're left with powerful questions that extend far beyond this one tragedy. Do you believe the justice system is doing enough to protect women from domestic threats before it escalates to murder? What early signs of obsession or control have you personally witnessed, either in yourself, a friend, or a loved one? Did you act on them? Should every woman experiencing emotional abuse seek legal protection, even if there's been no physical harm? Or are current legal protections too weak to help in time? How can we prevent stories like Jameka's from repeating in our communities? What laws, outreach, or education do you believe are missing right now? If a friend confided in you that they felt watched or followed, but had no proof, what would you do? Would you encourage legal action or dismiss it as paranoia? The story of Jameka Williams is a chilling reminder that many domestic murders don't begin with violence. They begin with silence. Patterns of control, manipulation, and fear often go unnoticed, unreported, or dismissed. In this case, the legal system ultimately delivered conviction, but it failed to protect Jameka when she was alive. Her death now serves as a public call to re-examine how we respond to emotional abuse, stalking, and domestic threats before they turn fatal. Let us know in the comments. Do you think this case was preventable? What should have been done differently? Your voice may help prevent another tragedy. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.